Stepping up our game, rising from the underground, playing our sound to the overground crowd, making it for the girl that never turn his sound down. We blast our tunes so loud, come around in the bus. Drink what you have, give me love, give me that clap. Get down low, baby, make your hands clap. Show me some love tonight, show me some love. Drink what you have, give me love, give me that clap. Get down low, baby, make your hands clap. Stepping up our game, rising. Stepping up our game, rising.
And hello, everybody, to AATB Draft Talk. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Tom Barnett. And this has been free agency. Free agency has started. You know, the draft has changed now. So you have a lot of teams that have filled some needs. And, Tommy's team just filled a need this afternoon, adding Kenny Golladay. So, I know he's stoked about that. Him and I messaged back and forth, but it's going to be a shorter episode, but we're going to, dive into the free agency all around the league and how it affected the draft so far. But how's it going, Tom? You happy you got a number one receiver?
I'm happy you got the number one receiver. I'm waiting to see those contract details a little bit first, though. 4 years, $72 million, a little bit more than I was expecting for Golladay. He's going to be averaging $18 million a year now, six most in the league. So, we do get our number one, but it was a little more expensive compared to some of the other receivers that came out this year.
So, speaking about that, so we talked about, changing up what teams need, what the draft needs are for your New York Giants. It's going to change. I know you mocked them. You love Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, those receivers. They're not going to go that route. Now that you have Kenny Golladay and you have these other guys, what would you say would be the top need now for a team like the New York Giants?
I think our needs still kind of depend what happens with Adoree Jackson. There are some rumors that they're talking to him, but I'm not sure if they'll honestly be able to wiggle him in with the cap situation. So I could see them going with a corner, maybe Surtain, Horn, Farley. Could go with whoever your favorite edge rusher is there at 11. The surprise pick I kind of have in there, we have a really young offensive line. I think that there's a chance if Rashawn Slater's still there, they could go with him, play him at guard, and then potentially move him to tackle at a later date if they want to.
See, that's the interesting. Now, the Eagles laid back a little bit, a few days, and then yesterday they hit Anthony Harris, the safety out of the Minnesota Vikings, which I thought was an absolute steal of a signing. You have a guy, especially the contract that was there, 1 year, $5 million. And last year he played on the franchise tag. And yeah, he didn't have any interceptions last year. And I think a lot of people look at that and say, well, he had a down year. He had a bad year. I wouldn't really say it was a bad year when you look at Minnesota and that they had Yannick Ngakoue and they got rid of him. Then Daniil Hunter got hurt. Everson Griffin's no longer on the team. So you lose so much pass rush help that, and also Michael Pierce, who who signed in free agency, opted out. So their defensive line was super scarce, and they weren't able to rush the passer like they have in years past. So that kind of hurt him. But he did have over 100 tackles. He can do so many things, and I feel the great part about it is they lost Jalen Mills, who signed a big contract with the New England Patriots, and I was surprised with that he got as much as he did, but. He did play well last year, but if you can supplement and I love Jalen Mills. I've said it on multiple shows. I like the way he plays. I'm a fan of Jalen Mills, but if I can get Anthony Harris, I'm okay with Jalen Mills going. Anthony Harris can do so much. He can do that Malcolm Jenkins role that the Eagles have kind of missed since Jenkins left. He can play so many different positions. And for me, I think it's a great selection. I still think the Eagles need to address that position in the draft. Maybe not as high as you would think if they didn't get a player like Harris. For me, I still think your number one need would be a receiver. I know there was some rumblings about Juju Smith-Schuster, but I don't really believe any of that. And, for them, I don't think anything's changed on that aspect of possibly, picking a receiver or a Kyle Pitts, or I know the cornerback situation is big, but there's so many corners because Jackson's also supposed to visit the Eagles, so that they need to shore up that position. But what other teams you think is drafts, positioning on who their needs, what has changed? Because there have been so many different moves that have happened so far, re-signings and signings in the last few days. If you want to give one, or we can go back and forth, whatever works best for you. But which one would you say?
I'd say Denver has changed the most. They've just signed Kyle Fuller, who was released by the Bears. So, I feel like everyone pretty much had them going to the corner in the first round.
I don't
Probably
think they
not
do.
going to be the case. Yeah, not going to be the case anymore with bringing in Fuller.
And
even though it's a 1-year deal.
They also signed Ronald Darby. So 3 years, 30. So that's the thing. They shored up that position, because we talked about, their secondary. There's no way they select a corner with number 9 now. So now does that become a quarterback? So that's where it becomes a little interesting here, but that's a great pick. What do you think about Fuller going there? Because he just signed today.
Yeah, I honestly think it's a pretty good move. I was surprised that the Bears they just released him instead of trying to trade him to Denver. Even with he had a pretty big cap hit, but I would have thought someone would have offered up something for him, to be honest.
That's what I was thinking too. Why not even get a late conditional pick too for him? But Chicago's doing a lot of interesting things. Andy Dalton, they signed as their quarterback. But I feel the biggest surprise for me was Tyrod Taylor going to Houston for $12.5 million on a 1-year deal. Yeah. To me, that signals that he's not going to be the starting quarterback of that team. And now we can get into where Deshaun Watson would fit. And I know there's all these rumors going on and everything. I'm not going to touch on any of that. But the thing is, you signed. Plus, they also traded for Ryan Finley, who was a backup for Cincinnati. So you trade for Ryan Finley, you sign Tyrod Taylor for $12.5 million, and then you still have Watson, who doesn't want to play for you. Plus, you're paying him all this money. Well, Houston also signed 25 other guys as well, which is, I can't believe. I don't know if you've ever seen this. I've never seen this, that they signed in the first couple of days. They've signed, I think, 25 guys, and they've traded for 3 or 4 guys. That's like an expansion team.
Yeah. Well, they were.
Well, yeah, they were a few years back.
But I think they're just trying to basically change the culture in that building and try to get guys in there who actually want to be there. I think with the quarterback situation, I think it's more of a cover yourself situation, because 1, will Watson play? Because 1, he doesn't want to be there, and 2, his legal situation. So I think that they're really just trying to cover themselves, that they're not royally screwed if they don't have him.
So Jason is checking in. Thanks for checking in, Jason. I know you're watching the tournament, which a lot of people are watching the tournament. He gives us an upset here. Ohio just beat Virginia. So the last champion is no longer. So there'll be it's not back-to-back, but I guess you can say it's back-to-back. But thanks for tuning in, Jason. But my other thing is, looking at like a team like Kansas City gets rid of their offensive tackles, and they sign Joe Thuney to that huge monster deal. And it helps because it shores up something that we saw in the Super Bowl. We saw Patrick Mahomes running for his life because of these injuries that they had. They were plugging guys in who really didn't fit in those selected positions. So, I watched it all last year with the Eagles. I know you've, as a Giants fan, Giants have always had a turnstile there at offensive line. They're signing guys, Nate Solder, who didn't live up to the potential that they thought, and you're drafting these guys, and you have all these other guys that are coming in that just aren't playing that well. And with the Eagles, it was the injury aspect of having all these injuries, all these multiple, I think 13 or 14 different offensive line combinations, and you're not going to win the NFL that way. So Kansas City shoring that up. Now, I'm not going to say it's going to change or going to waver what they do in the draft, because where they sit, it's wide open for them, because they're just so talented everywhere on the field that really they could go best player available. But I still won't rule out an offensive tackle for them, just because, Fisher's not there, Schwartz isn't there. I feel that would be a good fit for them, even getting Tooney. And they also got Kyle Long, who just came out of retirement to, ring chase a little bit, I feel. But he's still a productive player. I know he missed a year, but that's pretty good for your offensive guards to be Tooney and Kyle Long. So that was another one that intrigued me, and it was interesting with those two picks. Those two shots.
Yeah, I still think that they're going to end up taking an offensive tackle either in the first or the second round. Right at the end of the first round, though, like you were saying, there's so many different ways you could add a receiver, probably get an offensive weapon like a Rondale Moore or Kadarius Toney to kind of take a little bit of heat off of Tyreek Hill. I don't know if you saw the pro day of Sam Cosmi out of Texas. If you follow, there's this guy on Twitter, Ken something. He does what's called the relative athletic score. Cosmi was literally the highest offensive tackle that he has ever had, 10 out of 10 athletic profile. I mean, he didn't have like the greatest numbers. He's pretty raw coming out of Texas, but he's a pure athlete. I think he's going to go pretty high, especially after that pro day.
And it's crazy because I could see a couple of guys that we had mocked last week that could fall out just because of these signings and all these, it happens every year. We see it every year, but it just shows you that you could have a mock one week. And that's why I wanted to do a pre-free agency mock, because I knew it was going to change with all of these moves. And another team, the Las Vegas Raiders, they traded Rodney Hudson to Arizona. They traded Gabe Jackson to Seattle. They traded Trent Brown to New England. They re-signed Richie Incognito. But for me, I know their defense, they signed Solomon Thomas from the 49ers. I know that the defense is a big focal point and a need for them. They need defense. They need production out of their defense. Their defense was bad last year. And I still feel if those offensive tackles drop, if a Darashaw is there, I don't think Slater will drop that far, but if a Darashaw is there or some of the other guys are there, I could see them picking an offensive tackle just because you need depth and they need young players. Yeah, Denzel Good they re-signed, and you have Colton Miller there. Yeah, that's all well and good, but I feel like if you can get a guy that could step in and be on the opposite side of Colton Miller, you can have some guys who are there who are young, some bookend tackles. So that's another interesting one that I wanted to point out that changed a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're really trying to signal a case that they want to be that run-first team by bringing in Kenyon Drake, taking a little bit of pressure off of Josh Jacobs. I was still kind of confused by why it is so hard to build a good offensive line in the NFL. Granted, like they may have been like good pass blockers. Like you fit your scheme to like what your team's talents are. Like I feel like why try to force being a great run team if you have some good pass blockers there? It's how hard to build a good offensive line. But I wasn't really a fan of those moves.
The other thing was, Arizona replaced a veteran receiver because I think Larry Fitzgerald, I'm not sure if he officially retired. I know he said he wanted to retire, but they added AJ Green, which I thought was a little surprising. I know AJ Green isn't the AJ Green of old, I feel he's still a productive receiver, but they have some young guys I thought that they'd let step up and play, maybe a bigger role. Keyshawn Johnson and, Christian Kirk, those type of guys, Andy Isabella, those guys, I felt like they would give them a little bit more of a, defined role, opposite of DeAndre Hopkins. But that was an interesting one for me, was that with Arizona going that route, I definitely see Arizona going cornerback in the first round. They lost Patrick Peterson to Minnesota. So that's one that I could see is I can almost pinpoint that just because it would make the most sense. But that was another one that surprised me.
I could see why they wanted to add AJ Green, just because they run, so they spread out their offense so often that I can see trying to have as many receivers as possible for the case of one, injury, two, and kind of having a veteran in there for if Fitzgerald does retire, you have that veteran presence other than Hopkins to kind of lead those youngsters.
Now, I want to talk a little. The Eagles didn't do much. So looking around the NFC East and what the other teams did, Washington signed William Jackson, which was a big because losing Ronald Darby, you needed to fill that. But they also have their whole secondary is going to be basically remade because Fabian Moreau is a free agent. William Jackson, you add him. Ronald Darby is not there. So, that was interesting. But also, I think one of the biggest surprises was at first I thought Curtis Samuel was going to Jacksonville, reuniting with Urban Meyer, going back to Jacksonville. But then he goes and reunites back with Ron Rivera and goes to Washington. I think it was 3 year, $34 million, almost like $11 million a year. Yeah. I understand he's talented and he can kind of do a whole bunch of things, but for me, he doesn't have a super defined role. He's not a guy. If you look at his stats, to me, it doesn't warrant $11 million a year. That's just my opinion. I know what he can do. I know that he can play the slot. He can play in the backfield. He can do a lot of. He can do so many things. But to me, that's just a lot of money for a player that isn't your number one. And yeah, maybe he's your number two, but to me, he's more of a slot receiver.
Yeah, I think that they were kind of desperate to get another weapon opposite of Terry McLaurin. But that offense is starting to look like kind of good, actually, with Gibson coming on last year. Now you have a new quarterback, Ryan Fitzpatrick. I'm high on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think he's an improvement over Heineke. I do like Alex Smith, but I feel like he's got the magic in him,
See, that everyone talks about, this team's gotten so much better and everything.
Yeah.
Okay. No, their defense is good. I understand that. But Ryan Fitzpatrick always has a couple of games that he looks so great, and then he has another couple of games that he looks just darn awful. And he forces things, and he interceptions and turns the ball over. And so for me, I understand he has the weapons. I know, Terry McLaurin, he has Logan Thomas, he has Curtis Samuel, he has Antonio Gibson. I know that, but he's a bridge quarterback. He's not a superstar. He's 39 years old. So when you get older, it doesn't mean you get better. Not everybody is Tom Brady. I'm just stating the fact. Not everyone is going to be, even better in their years. They're not Barry Bonds. They're not shooting themselves up with PEDs. But, you're not going to have these guys that are going to be getting better as they age. So you had Taylor Heineke there as a insurance policy as a backup because every team you need backup quarterbacks. But another thing that's interesting is, Adam Schefter talked on the radio this week about, he says 4 quarterbacks are going to be going in the top 10. And see, that was interesting because not every one of those teams, need not top 10. I think he said top 10 or top 6 or before 6, there's going to be 4 quarterbacks selected. And that's interesting to me because you look at that, what teams are going to be trading up, because I don't think Atlanta, I know Atlanta, we mocked them, Justin Fields, but there's been a lot of rumblings that they really like Kyle Pitts. And if they keep, and they just restructured Matt Ryan. So that, to me, that says that they're not going to be drafting a quarterback. That happened before we did the mock. So knowing that, I wouldn't pick them with a quarterback now. So that's, a trade up there possibly. Cincinnati, I still think they go the offensive lineman, even with signing Riley Reif. They still need, young offensive linemen. But what's your take on that? Do you see 4 quarterbacks going super, super early?
I think that there's going to be a team that trades up if there's someone that they love. It really, though, a lot is going to come down to what do the Jets do with the second pick. I mean, they've kind of geared up in free agency. Are they adding weapons for Darnold, or are they planning on taking a quarterback?
Well, I don't know. Like, see, I think they trade Darnold, but see, that's where it all starts falling into place because number one's Lawrence. So New York, if they go Zach Wilson because they traded Darnold to, we'll just throw out Denver. You have that, but then you still have Trey Lance and Justin Fields. And for some reason, and we mocked it last week. The Trey Lance to Carolina, I don't know why it makes so much sense. I don't know why it seems like it just fits. It's just, I just keep seeing those two teams together, or those two together. It just, to me, it makes the most sense. But like, they need a quarterback. So, Detroit's not going to draft a quarterback. And they have Jared Goff, which I saw a great picture of him. He got, introduced to the Lions in this really nice jacket. I sent it to Jason, one of our writers there. He's the Detroit fan, and he's not so sold on Jared Goff. So, but they're not going to draft a quarterback. So, does Carolina trade up to San Francisco? Are they interested? Do they trade up? So there's a lot that is going to be interesting. And I feel like at number 6, if quarterbacks start going off the board at number 6, the Eagles are going to have a plethora of options on what they could do. Yeah, maybe they could trade back a couple spots and still get the player they want. But if you look behind them, the Giants are behind them now. They don't need a receiver. Dallas, I don't see Dallas drafting another receiver.
No.
So, you start getting further and further back. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to trade in the middle of the first round, but if they were to trade to 9 or trade to 12, they could still get, a high top player. I like Jamar Chase. I like Kyle Pitts, but, of course, Adam checking in here and knowing Howie, he'll take Elijah Moore because he can. Yeah, well, if you tell me they'll take Elijah Moore, I'm hoping it's in maybe the 5th round or so, or maybe the 3rd round, depending on how teams value him. But I wouldn't be mad to have to draft a player like him. But what do you say with that in terms of all those quarterbacks? But also, if that happens, it's also going to drop players at number 11 for the Giants as well, not receivers, since they don't need receivers, but it'll still drop somebody. So what do you say with that?
I mean, I don't think that Denver is going to trade up for a quarterback. I think that they have to ride out with Locke one more year. If anything, I would add a veteran instead of drafting his replacement already. It's just too quick to give up on the guy when, one, he had a COVID-shortened year in the offseason, learning a new offense under Pat Shurmur. He showed signs his rookie year that he could be a good quarterback. Grant, he didn't look as good last year, but I would still give him one more year. You already have weapons there in Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant. I'd ride him out for one more year and see what he has. Carolina and San Fran, though, I like as trade-up possibilities. I could see both Trey Lance fitting both of those offenses pretty well.
But it's interesting because you look at the landscape of the quarterback market, and the teams that are adding quarterback. Trubisky went to the Bills, so he's going to be the backup to Josh Allen. You have Andy Dalton signing with Chicago, saying he's going to be the starter there. What happens with Nick Foles? I know there's been some rumblings about him possibly coming back to the Eagles. To me, if it's for a backup, it's okay.
I wouldn't do it.
I'm not so, for me, Jalen Hurts, mentally, I don't think that's really going to bother him. I understand where some fans will be like, oh, this Super Bowl MVP, he needs to be starting. But Eagles need to get a veteran, whether they go the route of the Matt Barkley or the Chase Daniel or Geno Smith, which I don't want any of those, but even like an RG3 or possibly an Alex Smith or a Joe Flacco, they're going to need a veteran, backup. And then they'll go into the draft and, maybe they'll take a guy I'd like Jamie Newman, which would be great to see him. Now I'm going to keep pushing that. I'm going to keep.
As soon as I heard As soon as I heard the word draft, I knew the next words out of your mouth.
I'm gonna keep going their route because I know the way this ends. Jamie Newman's gonna go in the draft, and he's gonna be drafted by the Giants or by the Cowboys because it's just the way it happens. Any player that I like in the draft, that's what happen. That's what happens to them. Dak Prescott went to the Cowboys, and then it happens. Whenever I like a player a lot, they go to a team that I don't know if you remember years and years ago. Remember Ramses Barden?
Yep. Big physical receiver. Yeah. I thought he was going to be a big thing. He went like maybe I think it was the 3rd round.
Yes. I liked him a whole lot. He went to the Giants. He flamed out. Okay. Well, not so bad. But like that, always goes to a rival. But I think looking at the market and Darnold, say he goes to one of the, where does Darnold fit? Jacoby Brissett went to Miami. You had New England re-signed Cam Newton. So what does New England do? Washington with Fitzpatrick. So, Tyrod Taylor to Houston. Where does Deshaun Watson fit? So there's all these. If Deshaun Watson's possibly, I know Carolina's been, rumored a little bit there. You have that because this whole free agency quarterback market, the backup market, players being traded. I think that's going to affect where these draft picks go, of course. But I think there's not many spots left, and you still have a team like San Francisco. They're still tied with Garoppolo. A team like Carolina still has Bridgewater. I know the Bridgewater to San Fran. There was a couple of rumors I saw with that as well. So if that's the case, so there's a lot of moving parts. Where does Darnold fit if the Broncos stay with and they go a veteran route where they do that and they let Locke go another year? What other teams do you really see that is possible that could go? Because also you look at Las Vegas with Mariota. Are they going to keep Mariota as the backup or are they going to let him go? So I think there's so many options. There's so many teams that need backups, but what teams see it's running out. That's the thing. The teams are running out. It's running low on teams that need players that are going to start, especially with the draft coming up because these teams are going to draft players that are going to most likely be possibly starters. If it's a team like New York with Wilson and Trevor Lawrence with Jacksonville, those are definite starters. But like a Trey Lance, if he ends with a team where they have a veteran who they kind of bridge quarterback for him to sit. But what teams are out there that need quarterbacks that are starting caliber quarterbacks, basically?
I mean, you can kind of throw the Saints in there if they're not all in on
True.
Jameis. Or maybe the Steelers for drafting someone for next year if they think this is it for Ben. But other than that, maybe the Patriots too, if they want to get someone for after Cam, kind of as their young guy to learn the offense from him.
But they have Stidham though too. They drafted Stidham, so I'm not sure if he's.
I'm not too sure that they're actually high on Stidham anymore because if they did, they wouldn't be resigning Cam Newton.
True. Yeah, I hear you that, especially for $14 million.
Yeah.
New England kind of went hog wild in free agency. So
yeah.
But then again, when Tom Brady goes and wins a Super Bowl, and everyone's saying that it was because Tom Brady won and Bill Belichick isn't, Bill Belichick had the money. They geared up for this. All these opt-outs and what they did nothing last year in free agency, and they just kind of sat back. And for them, it's just they had all this money, so let's go spend it. Let's add a lot of talent to this team. And then they didn't add old talent. They added guys who were in their mid-20s. So it's not like they added guys who were 29, 30, 31, 32. So that's interesting because I know, with the whole Stidham didn't look good last year when he stepped in, had to play a little bit. He didn't look great. And he's still young, but you go down the list and you think of the teams that really need quarterbacks. Yeah, there's a small handful now because you look at the draft, Trevor Lawrence to Jacksonville, possibly Zach Wilson to the Jets. Then what do you really have next? The teams that, bona fide need quarterbacks, Carolina, San Fran, you possibly Denver. So I don't think the Eagles are drafting a quarterback, but for me, that's interesting because you have guys, Lawrence, Wilson, Fields, Lance, and then Mac Jones, who's coming up a little bit. The other guys in the second, third, later rounds like the Trask, Newman, Mond, other guys in that aspect, they're not real, players in terms of starting. Those are guys that are just going to be fill-ins through other teams and backup roles and stuff like that. But those 5 guys, for me, I could see Washington definitely taking a quarterback. And I think they're sitting there thinking, this is pretty good. Hopefully Darnold goes to this team so it pushes back. And, a team like Washington, a team like, the Bears, teams like that if a quarterback gets pushed down, that they can draft and hopefully fill the need, because they're not going to get the veteran, because the Bears already have the veteran. And, Carolina has Bridgewater, but they need the young guy. So I feel this is where the rest of this backup quarterback market and or trade market, where does Watson go? Where does Darnold go? Stuff like that is going to be very interesting to see basically the next steps, because some of these quarterbacks that have signed, they, like the Tyrod Taylors was a surprise, and then Fitzpatrick to Washington and Brissett to Miami. Those were a little interesting. So I feel
I like the Brissett to Miami. I feel like Brissett's a very underrated quarterback. I would have I thought he would have been a good fit for Philly as their backup quarterback.
You think I like Jamie Newman? I loved Jacoby Brissett when he came out.
Yeah.
I loved when he came out of NC State. I liked his tool. That I said, yeah, he'll be drafted in the middle rounds, possibly a starter, but I liked his makeup and what he brings. And he showed you after Andrew Luck retired, he stepped in, to a tough situation, and he handled it. And then they bring in Phillip Rivers, and he has to be the backup, but he was getting paid very handsomely. So he gets to go to Miami, because if Tua struggles and they bench him, he's the next guy in line, and he's a prototypical backup that if you need him, he can step in and take over.
Yeah, I honestly thought that Bill Belichick was going to make a run at him before they re-signed Cam Newton, kind of have that Patriots reunion. He would have been a good fit for New England. I kind of like him more than Cam, to be honest, especially for the price.
For the price, and he's not that old either, so he's still young, and he can do, a number of things. Like I know Cam Newton. I think a lot of people, go with the name on that. Cam Newton has dropped a little bit, but I feel that he's going to take a little bit of a step up this year, just because the playmakers around him, they have a lot more than they had last year. Last year, I think they were by far the worst.
They had no receivers,
especially after
Edelman. Yeah,
he got hurt early. So, Jacoby Myers stepped up a little bit, but they added a couple tight ends, they added a couple receivers to that roster to help out Cam. So they're going to take that step, but it's interesting. And, this is just the first wave of free agency. The thing is, these teams adding all these players, what it's going to do is it's going to cause for some cap casualties and some players being cut, and, some pretty good players being cut. We've already seen it with, Geno Atkins was cut from Cincinnati. You had, we just talked about Kyle Fuller was cut from Chicago. So no, we're going to keep seeing these guys cut and everything like that too. So it's in the process is just keep going. The second and third rounds of free agency are just as important as the first round of free agency, because, the one thing that I really like, and I know people, the first day of free agency, and then, the tampering, and then the first actual day of free agency, people want to see their team sign 2, 3, big name guys, 2, 3 guys, get involved right away. But it's not always the smartest thing to do. I know from experience, watching, signing guys like Nnamdi Asomugha and stuff like that, where you think it's, Byron Maxwell, you think it's great, but then it turns out not to be that great. It with, seeing some signings that the Giants have done. Remember, I remember, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago when they signed Snacks Harrison, Janoris Jenkins, they signed Olivier Vernon. They signed all these guys, and you're like, oh my, look at all this. And, it doesn't
works
always
for like a year sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So staying in the background, taking a seat, like I don't want to give him credit, but Harry Roseman did a little bit, I'll give him a little tap on the back for the Anthony Harris signing, because I thought that was a great value signing. That was a tremendous deal. But that's what they're doing. They're waiting now because they're waiting for those bargains. Teams are filling up their rosters. So free agents who are waiting, they're going to look at a roster and be like, wait a minute, they signed 2 guys at the same position. Why am I going to go there when I can go to this team, maybe take a tiny bit less? Because the money's not all going to be there. The cap has been cut. So the longer these players wait, their deals and the money is going to go down. So the Eagles may be able to get 2 or 3 veterans, whether they've been already cut from a team or have been sitting on the market, get these guys to fill the roster out and get some veteran depth and, help them out. So for me, it's the second and third wave of free agency is just as important, because the Eagles did that in 2017. They got the value guys, the LeGarrette Blunts, the Patrick Robinsons, the Chris Longs. They got these guys on these lower level, mid-level deals, and didn't do it in the first week of free agency. So, what I say to people is be patient. It'll happen. They'll make moves. They still have to fill a roster out. So, and, Daniel here says, I'm fine with them waiting and, getting these guys for good deals. Exactly. We know this is a rebuild. They need to retool and rebuild this roster by going out and signing, over the hill veterans for, more than enough money, or guys who were hurt last year, signing them to 4 years, $72 million like the Giants did. I don't know if that's, I'm just throwing that in there. I think that's a great deal that the Giants did, but stuff like that.
Our first big number 1 guy since Plaxico. I mean, Odell was a number 1, but he didn't have the size that Daniel Jones needs.
So you're saying this gives Daniel. So let's transition to this real quick before we wrap it up. I see a lot of people posting that, Daniel Jones is getting the weapons that Josh Allen got last year. So could Daniel Jones have a resurgence type of, year that Josh Allen had? You got Kenny Galladay, you have Darius Slayton already there, you have Saquon Barkley, Evan Ingram's still there, you signed John Ross as a speed guy, as basically your third, fourth receiver.
They have Dante Pettis still too, reuniting that the old Washington days.
You have Dante Pettis as well. So, and you still have Sterling Shepard. So, as long as everyone's healthy, I think that's a good core. But I would pump the brakes because the offensive line isn't.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to get to. That's what changes the entire scenario. The entire offense depends on how much the offensive line develops since they're so young. Left tackle, he's going to be a second-year player, Andrew Thomas. Right tackle, second-year player, Matt Pert, if he is a starter, or if Nate Solder wins it. If Nate Solder wins it, the guy's never even played right tackle, so who knows how well that'll go. Left guard, you have Will Hernandez, who has struggled since his rookie season. He's taken a step back essentially every year. Right guard, Shane Lemieux, another second-year guy. Nick Gates, center, played the position for the first year last year. So there's a lot hinging. I mean, they took massive steps as the season went on, and Judge kind of rotated his offensive line throughout the year to keep them fresh and also work with different combinations. But it really just depends if they develop and take that next step.
Yeah, and that's
you could have all the weapons. If you have no time to throw the ball, it means nothing.
Look at the Super Bowl. You have all those weapons, but if you don't have time to throw the ball, it doesn't really matter. And it's going to be key because the defensive lines in the NFC East, they're pretty good. It's one of the best divisions in terms of defensive lines in the league. So that's definitely something worth looking at. But I'm going to wrap it up. We cut this episode a little short, just talk a little free agency before we start getting back into the mock drafts. Make sure you're checking out aatbirds.com for, we got a lot of, pro day media Zooms that we're going to be a part of now. Our writer, Adam Mack, was a part of Georgia's and Stanford and Syracuse this last week. So he's got write-ups on all 3 of those with some video, with some questions that he asked some of the prospects. And this week we have a couple lined up, not fully confirmed, but We got a couple that we were looking at getting into there. So just keep your eyes on atbirds.com, and the writers will be getting some info out on that, anything that they cover. So just make sure you're checking that out. Making sure that you're, checking out all the guys on AAT Birds and all the articles on atbirds.com. It's great stuff. Check out the shop. We got some new things popping up, some new gear we're going to be dropping. So make sure you get your AATB Draft Talk shirts. They are available as well. But just make sure you follow all of us. You can follow Tom at tbarnett91. You can follow myself at johnnyU9322. And we want to thank everyone for listening. We want to thank everyone for watching. We appreciate it. And just make sure you tune into all the wonderful content that we have on All About the Birds Network. On Mondays, Chips and Dish. On Tuesdays, Fairway to Heaven. On Wednesdays, the flagship show, the weekly report, AT Birds Weekly Report. And also check out on Fridays, you have Birds, Beers, and BS, YouTube exclusive. So you can only see that on YouTube. So make sure you're checking that out. Make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel, along with following Instagram accounts and the Twitter accounts and the Facebook. So a lot of stuff going on. And if you want to be a part of the team, if you want to be a content creator for All About the Birds, just message any one of the guys, any one of me, Chip, Phil, shoot us a message, or even message the All About the Birds who comments, everyone who